What if a head of state's love affairs were so explosive they plunged an entire kingdom into civil war? This is not modern gossip. This is not speculative or guesswork. This is the story of a king whose love for men was so open that the elite decided he had to disappear. They tried to cover it up. They tried to rewrite history, but the evidence still exists. And the raw facts are more shocking than anything you were ever taught in school. This is the account of King Edward II, his lovers, and the political destruction that tore a kingdom apart. Imagine being the most powerful man in England in the year 1307. You are King Edward II, just 23 years old. Your father was Edward I, the Hammer of the Scots, a ruthless tyrant who crushed his enemies. Everyone expects you to follow in his footsteps with an iron fist and a heart of stone, but you have other priorities. You do not want endless wars. You do not want to conquer Scotland. You want only one thing. Piers Gaveston. And this raises the question no one dared ask out loud. Why did this feel immediately bigger than a simple friendship? Piers was not a typical nobleman. He was a knight from Gascony. He was charming, sharp-witted, and fearless. Where Edward was insecure, Piers radiated confidence. He was the kind of man who walked into a room and instantly commanded attention. In a court full of hardened warriors and political predators, he became Edward's safe haven. Their bond was so obvious that even the old king sensed trouble. Chronicles from the era speak in careful code of an undue intimacy. In the 14th century, that meant the relationship had become politically radioactive. It was no longer private. It was power. It was access. And it was a problem. Edward I decided to intervene. He banished Piers Gaveston, not for treason, not for theft, but purely because his influence over the Crown Prince had grown too great. The young Edward begged his father on his knees to let Piers stay. A humiliating act for a future king. His father refused, and Piers was forced to leave. Edward collapsed completely. He became a shadow of himself. Courtiers and diplomats recorded his melancholy with precision. This was not teenage heartbreak. It was a matter of state. Because when the heir to the throne cannot function, the kingdom feels it. Then the old king died. Edward did not hesitate for a second. Even before the mourning period had ended, he brought Piers back. The speed of the move shocked the nobility. It seemed he was more excited about his lover's return than his own coronation. Then he made it official. He named Piers Gaveston the Earl of Cornwall, a title normally reserved for royal blood. To the old aristocracy, it was an open provocation. The king was using his power to install his favourite as the second most powerful man in England. And if anyone later tried to claim this was all interpretation, there was one problem. The receipts still exist. Royal accounting records tell a fiery story of obsession. A constant stream of gifts, gold chains, jewel-encrusted belts, the finest horses. On a single day, 40 horses were gifted at once. Edward even gave Piers jewels intended for his future wife, Isabella of France. And that is where the danger becomes impossible to ignore. Isabella was the daughter of the powerful King Philip IV. By giving her jewels to Piers, Edward insulted not just his bride, but the entire French monarchy. It was a diplomatic slap in the face, delivered in public, and everyone understood the message. In 1308, the scandal was sealed for all Europe to see. During the coronation, Edward insisted that Piers carry the crown of St. Edward in the procession, an honour normally reserved for royal blood. Then came the banquet. Piers was given a seat of honour above the French princes. In the Middle Ages, seating was not a detail, it was a declaration. Edward was announcing that Piers mattered more than anyone else. He spent more time with his favourite than with his new bride. 12-year-old Isabella was humiliated at her own wedding feast in front of the most powerful people in Europe. Some historians try to soften this into an intense friendship, but sources from the time speak of excessive love. And when a 14th century monk calls something excessive, the line has been crossed far too many times. Worse still, Piers made everything more dangerous with his arrogance. He mocked the great nobles, giving them derogatory nicknames like the Black Dog or the Hog. The king laughed along, blind to what he was really doing. These men were not just offended, they commanded their own armies. And they were deciding quietly that this would end in blood. In 1308, the nobility formed a coalition and issued an ultimatum: banish Piers or we rebel. Edward reluctantly sent him to Ireland, but the relationship did not stop. Archives show a constant flow of letters and money. Edward was so desperate to have Piers back that he even agreed to political reforms that limited his own power, concessions his father would never have made. In 1309, he succeeded. Piers returned, and instead of becoming cautious, Edward restored the old hierarchy immediately. The same closeness, the same favouritism, the same public humiliation for everyone else. The kingdom was not calming down, it was tightening like a rope. By 1312, the breaking point had arrived. The nobility decided banishment was not working. Piers had to die. A literal manhunt began, with the king and his lover fleeing from castle to castle. Eventually, Piers was cornered. He surrendered under the promise of a fair trial. That promise was broken instantly. The Earl of Warwick had him kidnapped. After a sham trial, Piers was brutally murdered and beheaded. His body was left behind like trash. And the king's reaction said everything. Edward collapsed. He locked himself away and refused to eat. He treated Piers not as a traitor, but as a martyr. He kept the body unburied. Buried in a royal chapel for over 2 years. He funded masses for his soul on a massive scale. The rift with the nobility was now permanent and irreparable. You would expect Edward to change, to protect himself, to retreat, but he did the exact opposite. He replaced Piers with Hugh Despencer the Younger. Where Piers was reckless, Hugh was calculating and ruthless. He did not just enjoy power, he devoured it. Once again, their chambers were connected. Once again, they dined in private. Chroniclers said the king was addicted to Despencer, and Hugh began aggressively seizing land from other nobles with the king's full support. It was a mafia operation with a crown on top. Queen Isabella, now grown and politically savvy, was tired of being humiliated. When Despencer attacked her personally by seizing her lands and income, and Edward allowed it, the line was crossed. England became a powder keg again. Edward and Hugh ruled like tyrants, taking bloody revenge on Gaveston's killers. For a moment, they seemed to have won, but the hatred ran deeper than ever. Then came 1325. Isabella was sent on a diplomatic mission to France. Once in Paris, she refused to return as long as Hugh Despencer remained in power. She gathered exiled nobles around her and took Roger Mortimer, a sworn enemy of Despencer, as her lover. Together, they plotted an invasion. In 1326, they landed in England, and support for the king evaporated. Cities and castles opened their gates to Isabella. The kingdom of Edward II dissolved into nothing. Edward fled with Hugh, but they were captured. Hugh Despencer met a gruesome end. He was hanged, castrated, and quartered as a public warning. Then it was the king's turn. In 1327, Edward was forced to abdicate in favour of his teenage son. He was imprisoned in Berkeley Castle, deep in the dungeons, where his enemies waited for the right moment to silence him forever. In September of that year, the inevitable happened. Official documents spoke of a natural death, but a horrific story tore through the halls of power. It was whispered that Edward had been murdered in the most sadistic way imaginable, by having a red-hot iron poker driven into his bowels. It was an execution intended not just to kill him, but to punish him for his sexuality. A brutal symbolic act his enemies treated as a final judgment. According to legend, his screams could be heard far beyond the castle walls. That rumour set history ablaze. Whether it literally happened or was propaganda, the fact that people believed it reveals everything. It was a judgment on the king's relationships and a warning to every future monarch. Afterward came the cover-up. Historians tried to scrub the sexuality from the story, speaking of misplaced trust. But the receipts of history remained. The accounting records, the reports, the chronicles, the evidence never fully went away. The story of Edward II is not a simple gossip tale. It is a hard-hitting case study on power, vulnerability, and the consequences of living your truth openly in a hostile world. He was a king who refused to pretend, and he paid the ultimate price for it. While the elite hated him, his tomb in Gloucester Cathedral became a place of pilgrimage for common people who felt pity for the man destroyed by a corrupt ruling class. 3 men, 2 favourites, 1 crown, a kingdom that broke because the king's love was too visible to ignore. History is never as black and white as they teach us. The real stories are always more complex, sharper, and far more scandalous. History is written by the victors, but the truth always finds a way out. If you want more hidden histories and stories sharper than the official version, like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps bring these forgotten scandals back into the light.